Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's now 9 a.m., so we'll go ahead and get started with today's presentation. Welcome to the public workshop on adding certain acids and bases to the candidate chemicals list. My name is Danielle Gilstrap, and I serve as a public participation specialist in the Office of Environmental Equity at the Department of Toxic Substances Control, which we're going to refer to as DTSC in today's presentation. Today's workshop is a part of our Safer Consumer Products program, which we're going to refer to as SCP. This workshop is being recorded, and by joining, you agree to be recorded. The workshop is scheduled from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. However, if we're able to answer all of the questions and collect all of the comments prior to 11:30, we may end early. If we do reach the end of the workshop and we're unable to answer all of the questions and collect all of the comments, please email your questions and comments to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. We've also put that email address in the chat box for you. The purpose of today's workshop is to provide information on the proposal to add 12 acids and bases to the candidate chemicals list. Following the presentation, we'll take questions, comments, and feedback from the audience. Please note the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of this workshop will be available on DTSC's SCP website. We shared that link earlier in the chat. For those of you dialed in on the phone, you can find these links in the presentation slides that we'll post to the SCP webpage next week. Slide 2, please. I'll now go over the logistics for our presentation today. You're in a listen and participation role. Automatic closed captions have been turned on. If you'd like to follow along with the closed captions, please click on the CC button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Please note, we're not going to take questions through the chat feature today. That feature is reserved for providing hyperlinks and information to our attendees. Today, we'll be taking questions through the Q&A feature and raised hands. Please click on the Q&A on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. You can submit your questions throughout the workshop, and we'll respond to them during the Q&A session after the presentation. You can send us as many questions as you want, but we do ask that you send them one at a time so that we're able to respond to each one fully. Additionally, we'll be taking questions via raised hands. Please wait until the end of the presentation to raise your hand. We'll do our best to respond to your questions in the order that we receive them. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. When we call on you and prompt you to unmute yourself, press *6. Following the Q&A session, we'll have a 10-minute break and then have the public comment session. Please note our panelists will only be responding to questions during the Q&A portion of this workshop. The public comment portion is reserved specifically for collecting any comments regarding the proposal to add 12 acids and bases to the candidate chemicals list. Similar to the structure of the Q&A portion, we'll be taking public comments via the Q&A feature and raised hands. You can also submit comments in writing to the CalSafer website. We've shared that link in the chat. Lastly, please know that our presenters are hosting this workshop from different locations today. Please bear with us if there are any time lags, longer pauses, or technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience and understanding in making the workshop a success today. Slide 3, please. This is our agenda for today's workshop. First, Robin Christensen, Deputy Director of the SCP program, will provide a welcome and opening remarks. Then, Ravi Kang, Senior Environmental Scientist, will give a brief overview of the Safer Consumer Products program. After that, Lizette Romano and Venice Evans will present on the proposal to add 12 acid bases to the candidate chemicals list. Following the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session to respond to your questions. This is your opportunity to ask questions for the panel to address today. After that, we'll have a 10-minute break, and then we'll go into the public comment session. Please note, our panel will not be responding to comments we receive, but we will compile, review, and consider all comments before finalizing the proposal. Finally, Robin Christensen will wrap things up with closing remarks. Thank you to all of our panelists for your time and dedication in being here today. And without further ado, please welcome Deputy Director Robin Christensen. Over to you, Robin.
All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Robin Christensen, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Safer Consumer Products Program. As Danielle mentioned, you will also hear us refer to ourselves today as SCP or the SCP program. I'm really happy to see so many webinar participants here today, and I want to thank you all for joining us in this very critical public engagement process. Now, last month, we shared our technical document to propose to add 12 new chemicals to the candidate chemicals list. And today, you'll be hearing from our team of scientists from DTSC's Safer Consumer Products Program. We'll be starting off with an overview of the SCP framework in order to illustrate how our program works. This will then be followed by a presentation giving a high-level summary of the information that we provided in the technical document for those 12 acids and bases and why we're proposing to add them to our candidate chemicals list. The team will share exposure considerations, hazard traits, and potential adverse impacts for each of the chemicals. And we will also discuss the next steps in our process and how you can get involved as we propose to list these 12 acids and bases into the candidate chemicals list under the SCP regulations. After hearing from our team, we'll have time for questions and public comments. And so to wrap up, I want to thank everyone again for joining us at today's workshop. Your input and your engagement are critical to our process. We can't do our work without you. I'll pass it over to Robbie Kang.
Thank you, Robin. And again, welcome everyone. My name is Robbie Kang, and I'm an environmental scientist here at the SCP program. The mission of the SCP program is to advance the design, development, and use of products that are chemically safer for people and the environment. And we do this by implementing and enforcing regulations. We regulate consumer products that are sold, distributed, or manufactured in California. However, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and food do not fall within the jurisdiction of our program, even though they can be considered consumer products. Next slide, please. The graphic you see here illustrates the four-part SCP regulatory framework. This process starts with a candidate chemicals list that we manage by combining substances from 23 different authoritative lists into one list. And as we'll discuss in much greater detail today, SCP is also able to add chemicals to this list. The second part in our process is the priority product stage, where we evaluate consumer products for exposure concerns and propose specific priority products based on our research findings. It's important to note here that the listing of a priority product through the rulemaking process is generally the first time where our regulatory framework places regulatory requirements on the manufacturers of consumer products. After a priority product is listed, manufacturers have multiple options to comply. One of those is completing an alternatives analysis for the priority products, where they thoroughly evaluate the priority product and potential alternatives. And this evaluation may lead to the determination of a safer alternative to the chemical of concern in the priority product regulation. Finally, SCP considers the results of the alternatives analysis to determine if one or more regulatory responses are necessary to prevent or manage potential adverse impacts to human health or the environment. So this four-part process is a simplified summary of our framework. What this image doesn't show is the rigorous scientific analysis and external engagement with interested parties that our staff and program go through. This very workshop is a crucial step in our work where we present our research and solicit feedback from the public to help strengthen the actions we take. Next slide, please. So the candidate chemicals list, or the CC list, as we'll refer to it today, is a menu of chemicals that we can potentially regulate. And the chemicals on this list have all been identified by various authoritative bodies as having hazard traits or potential for exposure. These authoritative bodies include international research agencies, as well as federal and state programs including the California Department of Public Health and the Center for Disease Control, or sometimes even DTSC. We update our CC list quarterly, and you can view the up-to-date CC list on our website using the link just shared in the chat. The CC list is integral to our process as it includes the chemicals that are within the scope of our program. So as described in our regulations, SCP may add chemicals to the candidate chemicals list if they exhibit one or more hazard traits and or environmental or toxicological endpoints, as described in Chapter 55 of the California Code of Regulations, which you can view using the link just shared in the chat. Next slide, please. All of the specific factors that we are required to consider must show that 3 criteria are true of a chemical. First, that there are potential exposures to the chemical. Second, that there is potential for one or more of these exposures to contribute to or cause adverse impacts. And third, that we have considered the extent and quality of information that is available to substantiate the existence of these potential exposures and adverse impacts. If these 3 criteria have been met for a chemical, then we may initiate the rulemaking process and propose to list it on the candidate chemicals list. So now that we've covered a high-level overview of the SCP program, including how we may add chemicals to the CC list, I'll pass it on to Lizette to talk about the specific acids and bases we're proposing to add today.
Thank you, Ravi, and good morning, everyone. My name is Lizette Romano, and I'm an environmental scientist with the SCP program. There are a total of 12 acids and bases that we're proposing to add to the candidate chemicals list, or CC list. The breakdown is 4 acids, which are ammonium bisulfite, chromic acid, sulfamic acid, and oxalic acid, and 8 bases. For the bases that we're proposing to add, you'll see 4 hydroxides listed, which are potassium, lithium, calcium, and ammonium hydroxide, in addition to other bases, including ammonium thioglycolate, guanidine carbonate, sodium hypochlorite, and ethanolamine. This is the only time in the presentation that I will be listing all 12 acids and bases, but you can refer to these specific acids and bases in the technical document, which is linked in the chat. And these slides and recording will be made available shortly after the presentation. Next slide, please. To give some background, several corrosive acids and bases can be found in different types of consumer products, and they serve various purposes. Some of the products that these acids and bases can be found in include personal care and cleaning products, fragrances, textiles, and even pet care products. Some of these chemicals can cause adverse impacts to the skin, respiratory tract, eyes, through various routes of exposures, depending on how they are used in these products. So exposure routes include inhalation, ingestion, and skin and eye contact. When we first started this proposal, the focus was on identifying and listing acids and bases that are not currently on our CC list and are being used in product chemical combinations that we're actively researching, which you can find on our timeline, which we will link in the chat. Some acids and bases had already been identified through this work, such as lithium hydroxide or calcium hydroxide. And during this proposal, we identified additional ones that could have concerning hazard traits and are being used in consumer products. Next slide, please. This candidate chemicals addition would not create any new regulatory obligations, so we did want to make that clear. This listing doesn't impose any restrictions on any products. The proposal is to add these specific acids and bases to the CC list, which then gives us the possibility down the line to regulate a product containing these chemicals if we find reason to do so. But any action to regulate these chemicals and products would require a rulemaking and additional public engagement. Today, we're seeking your input and comments during this workshop and public comment period to ensure that our list is complete and accurate. While we could always add more chemicals to the CC list in the future, we'd like to capture all the appropriate acids and bases in this proposal. Next slide, please. Before adding chemicals to the CC list, we must first consider their potential for exposure. And one of the ways we can do this is by understanding their production and use. 10 of the 12 acids and bases are high production volume chemicals in the United States, with lithium hydroxide and chromic acid being the remaining 2 that are not. High production volume chemicals are either manufactured or imported at quantities equal to or above 1 million pounds per year. The high production volume of some acids and bases and reported presence in products of even more are both indicators of potential exposure. Some of the products that these high production volume chemicals are found in, shown on the images in the slide, and these include hair dyes, skin creams, soaps, shaving creams, cleaning products, and more. For lithium hydroxide and chromic acid, which are not high production volume chemicals, we see their use in hair and cleaning products as well. Since many of these chemicals are found in the same product types or in widely used product categories, this leads to the potential for cumulative exposures. I will now pass it over to Venice to talk about adverse impacts associated with these specific acids and bases. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Lizette. My name is Venice Evans, and I'm an associate toxicologist with the SCP program. We are required to identify potential adverse impacts associated with the list of acid and bases we are proposing. We use information from authoritative sources such as US EPA, FDA, and the European Chemical Agency to gather hazard trait data. In addition, we use the US EPA's Cheminformatic Hazard Module, also known as the Hazard Comparison Dashboard, to determine hazard scores for various human health and ecological toxicity endpoints and environmental fate parameters. The Hazard Comparison Dashboard does this by aggregating data from various authoritative and screening lists and integrate predictive models for some endpoints to fill data gaps. The chemicals we are proposing can be expected to have dermatotoxicity, ocular toxicity, respiratory toxicity, and reactivity in biological systems as hazard traits. Next slide, please. All 12 chemicals have the toxicological hazard trait of dermatotoxicity and ocular toxicity. They are recognized as potential skin and eye irritants. In addition, 9 out of the 12 chemicals are recognized as corrosive substances causing burns or corrosion to the skin and or eyes. The reactivity and biological system hazard trait would also apply to these 9 chemicals. Lastly, 4 out of 12 chemicals were recognized as skin sensitizers, causing allergic skin reactions and induce allergic contact dermatitis. Next slide, please. For the respiratory toxicity hazard trait, 5 out of 12 chemicals were recognized as potentially causing irritation and or damage to the respiratory tract when inhaled. This includes the nose, throat, and lungs. Other adverse effects associated with the respiratory toxicity hazard trait include asthma-like symptoms, shortness of breath, and difficulty breathing. Next slide, please. Presented here is a table summarizing all of the acid and bases and their associated hazard traits. We are aware that some of these chemicals may have other hazard traits, such as aquatic toxicity, which is identified in the technical document. However, for the interest of adding to the candidate chemical list, these hazard traits are sufficient. I will now pass it back to Lizette, who will summarize our findings from today's presentation.
Thanks, Venice. Next slide, please. To summarize the information presented today, we'll take another look at the evidence that we've presented for adding these chemicals to SCP's candidate chemicals list. First, we've shown that there are potential exposures to the 12 acids and bases that we're proposing to add through various products that they can be found in. Second, we've shown that there's potential for one or more of these exposures to contribute to or cause adverse impacts, as demonstrated through the identification of hazard traits. Some examples that Venice mentioned in today's presentation included skin, eye, and respiratory impacts. Lastly, we've used reliable information from government reports, peer-reviewed journals, and other scientific information. We've considered the extent and quality of that information to substantiate the existence of potential exposures and adverse impacts associated with the proposed addition of these 12 acids and bases. As a reminder, this addition to the CC list will not create any new regulatory requirements, and this listing doesn't impose any restrictions on any product. Next slide, please. For a more detailed explanation of our proposal, please see our technical document, which we've linked in the chat. We opened our 45-day public comment period on April 24, and we're still accepting feedback on our proposal. Please submit comments before June 9th through our CalSafer portal or during the public comment portion of this workshop or by emailing us. If you would like to receive updates on this proposal, please email us to sign you up for our SCP email list. And if you have any questions or comments after this workshop, please also feel free to email us and we'll put that in the chat. Our email is saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. Workshop information, including the recording, will be available on our workshops and upcoming events webpage soon. Next slide, please. SCP is interested in any and all feedback on our proposal. We're specifically interested if anyone has any additional information about any of these chemicals as we finalize this proposal. And this concludes our presentation on the 12 acids and bases. So I am now going to pass it over to Danielle.
Thank you, Lizette. Next slide, please. This concludes the presentation portion of today's workshop. Please check back at the DTSC SCP events page next week for a copy of the PowerPoint and within 2 weeks for the workshop recording. We'll now begin the Q&A portion of today's workshop. If you'd like to send us a question, please click on the Q&A button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can submit as many questions as you'd like, but we do request that you submit them one at a time so that we have enough time to answer each one fully. Additionally, we'll be taking questions via raised hands if you'd prefer to speak your question out loud. Please click on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen and wait to be called on. We'll let you know when to unmute yourself and ask your question. As a reminder, we won't be taking questions via the chat feature. For those of you joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know you have a question. We'll call on you and ask you to unmute yourself, and then you can press *6. Let's begin. I see we have a question from Subiksha. By adding these chemicals to the candidate chemicals list, does this only include intentional use of these chemicals, or are byproducts or unintentional presence of these chemicals also in scope?
I can answer that question. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Ernst. I'm a supervising engineer with the Safer Consumer Products Program. When we evaluate product chemical combinations as potential priority products, we look both at intentional uses and presence, unintentional presence in the products, such as byproducts or contaminated. So yes, that we do evaluate contaminants and byproducts, not just intentional use.
Thank you, Michael. Those are all the questions so far.
Danielle, may I add a little something to Michael's answer?
Of course, Andre, go right ahead.
Thanks. Just so Michael's exactly right. I just wanted to add that, as you heard earlier, that the addition of these chemicals to our candidate list doesn't regulate any consumer products. And if we were to name one of these as a chemical of concern in some future regulatory action, we would do so based on a determination that there was, potential for exposure to the chemical present as a contaminant, and that exposure had potential to cause significant or widespread harm. So we need to make the findings in order to regulate something, even if after we've added these chemicals to our list.
Thank you, Andre and Michael. We have another question. This one comes from Scott. It was mentioned that by adding a chemical to the CC list, there is no regulatory action triggered by DSC outside of California, where CC listing does trigger a regulatory action.
I'll jump in again. Oh, Michael, he was going to jump in. I'll let him.
There are some laws and statutes in California that use our candidate chemical list as a basis for reporting requirements. For example, there's AB 1200, which requires manufacturers of cookware to disclose that the presence of chemicals on our candidate chemical list in their products on a website. There are that is the one that comes to mind, but that yes, there are other laws and regulations that reference our candidate chemical list for reporting purposes.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Michael. It looks like we don't have any other questions at this time, but I would like to give our attendees a few more minutes to gather their thoughts and type out any questions. In the meantime, I'll just provide a few friendly reminders as you're collecting your thoughts. The PowerPoint from our workshop will be posted next week to our SCP event website. All of the links that we've mentioned today and shared in the chat will be in the presentation. So for anyone dialed in by phone, you'll be able to easily access them once those slides are available. And within the next 2 weeks, we'll also post the workshop recording to the SCP events website. It looks like we've gotten a new question in. This one comes from Dan. Some of the ingredients may be used in formulations to adjust pH. Therefore, within a formulation, some of the hazards observed for the isolated ingredients are likely not expected. Will this be considered at any point during DTSC's process?
I can answer this question too. That, as Andre mentioned, when we evaluate chemicals in the context of their use of the product. And so we would be looking at, and when we do so, we look at a variety of factors like concentration, so yes, that would absolutely be considered when we're evaluating the actual product chemical combination with the products that would use that include one or more of these chemicals. And in order to list something as a priority product, that we would have to find that that chemical as used in that product has the potential to cause harm.
Thank you, Michael. Our next question comes from Scott. Is the decision on whether to ultimately list a chemical on the CC list solely the decision of DTSC?
I can answer that. Hi, everyone. I'm Simona Balan. I lead our Regulations and Policy branch. And yes, this decision belongs to DTSC. It's part of the Safer Consumer Product Regulations that we implement. So yes, we make this decision, but like we are doing today, we consider public comment in this decision. So we do welcome your input to let us know whether you think we have the right chemicals on the list, if there's anything we're missing, any other considerations that we should include when we make this decision. So thank you for being here today and providing that input.
Okay. Our next question comes from Matthew. If acids or bases are neutralized in the product, does that affect the listing?
That it wouldn't affect the candidate chemical listing that we're talking about today, but once again, that how the acid or base is used in the product is what we would evaluate during any potential priority product listing. So definitely, if the acids or bases are neutralized, we would take that into account when evaluating that specific product chemical combination.
Thank you, Michael. Our next question comes from Amy. Many of those ingredients are regulated by EU cosmetic regulation and Canada Hot List. Can you consider to be aligned with international regulatory agencies?
When evaluating chemicals and products, we do research and look for use information for how other authoritative bodies are regulating chemicals to help inform our decisions. I wouldn't necessarily say that we're aligned. Our program and our regulatory process is fairly unique. So we definitely consider other regulations and programs, but our regulatory framework is completely separate.
Thank you, Michael. We have another question from Scott. Some of the 12 candidate chemicals are also active pesticidal ingredients. It was mentioned at the start of the webinar that pesticides are out of scope. Is DTSC only considering the non-pesticidal use of the chemical when considering if the chemical gets listed?
I can answer this one. Yeah, we don't regulate pesticides, so it would be the non-pesticide use, as mentioned by Robbie.
Yeah, that's correct. So in that case, we wouldn't evaluate the use of the chemicals as a pesticide if we decide to list a priority product.
Thank you, Lizette and Ravi. Those are all of the questions we've had entered so far. Just going to give folks another couple of minutes to collect their thoughts, think about the presentation, and let us know if they have any other questions. Again, just some friendly reminders while you're collecting your thoughts. After we wrap up the Q&A portion of the workshop today, we'll also have time for dedicated public comments. Public comment period opened on April 24th and closes at midnight on the night of June 9th. You can share your comments once we begin the public comment portion of this workshop after the Q&A session. Though our panel won't be responding to comments today, They will be compiling all comments, reviewing them, and considering them as they finalize the proposal to add these 12 acids and bases to the candidate chemicals list. You can also email your comments and questions to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov or submit them online at our CalSafer website. Also, just a friendly reminder, you can either click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in the question that you have, or you can raise your hand if you'd like to speak your question out loud. For anyone dialed in on the phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions at this time. We are going to go ahead and skip the 10-minute break that we mentioned and move forward into the public comment session. So let's go ahead and get that started. The public comment period is currently active. It began on April 24th and ends at midnight on June 9th. The process for the public comment portion of the workshop is similar to that of the Q&A. If you want to send us a comment, please click on the Q&A button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You can submit as many comments as you want. Like the Q&A portion, we do ask that you submit your comments one at a time to give us time to compile them effectively. You can also raise your hand if you would prefer to speak your comment out loud. For those of you who have joined by phone today, please press *9 to raise your hand and let us know you have a comment. When we call on you and ask you to unmute yourself, please press *6. You can also submit your comments by email by sending them to saferconsumerproducts@dtsc.ca.gov. And just a friendly reminder, our panel will not be responding to comments that we receive, but we will be compiling, reviewing, and considering all comments before finalizing the proposal. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Please go ahead and submit your comments to us through Q&A or by raising your hand. We'll give you a couple of minutes just to collect your thoughts and type out your comments in the Q&A box. Another friendly reminder while we wait for folks to collect their thoughts and type out their comments. For anyone who joined by phone, all of the links will be included in the presentation, which will be posted to the DTSC SCP events webpage next week, and the recording of this webinar will be posted to the events webpage within the next 2 weeks. For anyone who would like to submit comments, please either click on the Q&A button in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen and type out your comment to us, or you can raise your hand. For anyone joined by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Okay, seeing no comments at this time, I would like to go ahead and move forward. If you do want to send us a comment after you've had a little more time to review the presentation, collect your thoughts, please visit our CalSafer website. We put that link in the chat earlier. And as I mentioned, all links from the chat from today's workshop will be included in the slides that we're posting by next week. We would now like to conclude with closing remarks by Robin Christensen. Robin, if you could please come on and give us your closing thoughts.
There we are. Thank you. Thank you, Danielle, Ravi, Venice, and Lizette for today's overview of our proposal to list these 12 acids and bases to the candidate chemicals list. For folks in the audience, if you come away from today's workshop with just 2 points, it's this. Our proposal today is to add the acids and bases to the candidate chemicals list based on their hazard traits and potential exposure from consumer products. At this time, we are not listing any priority products. Please read through the technical document for a more detailed explanation. And number 2, we really do encourage your input, your considerations, your information, and your suggestions. So I encourage you to please share these through CalSafer or through the email that's been shared in the chat. And finally, I want to thank you again for your participation today and for your interest in our process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin, and thank you to all of our panelists and our audience. We appreciate you staying engaged and all of your questions that you shared with us during the workshop. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.